Hey, this is Richard here to talk about my experience traveling from Venice to Tuscany and back via train and rental car. My wife and I were planning a trip to Italy earlier this year, and we wanted to combine a visit to Venice with a side trip to the Tuscan countryside. I booked a hotel in Venice and at Borgo San Felice, a resort in the countryside northeast of Siena, and then I found out there was no obvious way to travel between these two places. Online research suggested two popular options. One was to rent a car in Venice and make the 4-hour plus drive south past Bologna and Florence to the hotel. The other involved taking a train from Venice to Florence and picking up a rental car for the rest of the journey. People online seemed to favor the latter option, and that was the one I chose. The main benefit of this approach is that it minimizes time spent driving on unfamiliar Italian highways, while still giving you the flexibility that comes with having a car in the countryside where public transportation is limited. There are two places where you get rental cars in Florence. The first is on Via Borgo Ognissanti, a street near the city's historic center and train station. The problem with this option is that it can be tricky to drive out of the city while avoiding the limited travel zones, or ZTLs, that are reserved for buses, taxis, and residents. If you should stumble into one of these zones, it's likely that a camera will capture an image of your license plate, and the rental company will pass that expensive ticket on to you. That's a key reason why many travelers into Florence rent cars from the airport. It's close to the train station, but far enough outside of the city center that your chances of unwittingly driving into one of these limited traffic zones are minimal. A month and a half before the trip, I booked a mid-size Volkswagen crossover vehicle from Budget using the Expedia website. Pickup was Wednesday afternoon, with a return on Sunday afternoon. The cost for 4 days was $336, or about $80 a day. This figure rose significantly when taxes and other fees were added. A few days before I was due to pick up the car, I got a call from a Budget rent-a-car representative to do pre-check-in. This involved me giving some basic information, like my passport number and credit card. It helps speed the check-in process when you get to the rental car center. If you miss the call, you can reschedule it online. It's recommended that you get an international driver's license if you're planning to drive in Italy. You don't need this license to rent a car. It's something you would show to the police in the event you were stopped for any reason. I got my license at the local AAA office. It was pretty easy. I just walked in, got my picture taken, and then they put the thing together while I waited. It costs $20 and is good for 1 year after it's issued. The train portion of the trip is quite easy to plan. You can buy the tickets from Venice to Florence and back through the ItaliaRail website, which is very easy to use. Numerous trains run this route every day, so you can pick a time that's most convenient. The train trip takes about 2 hours and 10 minutes, plus you need to account for another 30 minutes to an hour to get from your lodgings in Venice to the Santa Lucia train station. You'll want to time your trip to avoid rush hour when you're driving out of Florence. I booked a 12:30 departure because that allowed us to check out of the hotel and get to the train station in plenty of time. We checked out of our hotel on Wednesday and then took a private water taxi to the train station. The ride was about €70. You can also take the public water taxi, which is considerably less expensive, but it takes longer and it can be a hassle maneuvering your suitcases on board if it's crowded. Our high-speed train left Santa Lucia station at about 12:30 and got into Florence's Santa Maria Novella station on time at 2:40. The taxi stand is right outside the station on the south side. We were off the train and in the taxi in a matter of minutes. Bear in mind, if you're seated toward the back of the train as it enters the station, it might take you a bit longer to get to the taxi stand, and there might be a line there when you arrive, but it usually moves quickly. Make sure you tell the taxi driver that you're going to the rental car center at the airport and not the airport itself. The airport and rental car center are northwest of the train station, pretty close distance-wise, but the drive goes through a densely populated area with lots of traffic lights, so plan on it taking 15 minutes or so. The taxi ride cost us 10 euros. The rental car center is located across the street from the south end of the small airport. It's on the east side of a large parking lot. The taxi driver should leave you right at the curb outside the center. When you arrive, take a moment to note where you're going to come in when you return the car, because it's on the other side of the parking lot, the west side. There is a row of small buildings there bearing signs of various rental car companies. Budget shares a cramped office with Avis inside the rental car center. There was only one customer ahead of us when we got there. But from what I've seen online, this office can get quite backed up. That's one reason it's a good idea to do the pre-check-in on the phone. This supposedly will enable you to get served ahead of those who are waiting but haven't done the pre-check. Picking up the car was quite easy. As with rental car centers in the United States, this one gives you the opportunity to fill your gas tank before you return the car, or you can have them do it for an additional fee. We chose the latter as I did not want to deal with finding a gas station and pumping gas before I returned the car. Out of an abundance of caution, we also got the additional insurance. It was about 8 euros a day, even though people online insist that it's not necessary. The woman at the rental car counter was very friendly and spoke English excellently. My big question to her was how to get from the rental car center to the highway south to Siena. She explained it in detail and even wrote out the directions on a piece of paper. Basically, you get on the nearby toll road, which is called the Autostrada. You get a ticket from the automated toll booth, drive a few miles, get off the toll road, pay the toll, and then you'll be on the highway to Siena. It sounded pretty straightforward. The car was parked on the other side of the lot. A bit of a walk. It was a Volkswagen as promised, a nice clean car with low mileage. I drove it around the lot to pick up my wife and the suitcases. A quick note, there are no rest stops on the highway to Siena, so I would recommend you use the bathroom at the rental car center before you get on the road. Also, as you probably know, people in Italy drive on the right side of the road, same as people in the United States, so there's no big adjustment there. Once we drove out of the center, we entered a maelstrom of traffic, roundabouts, and confusing road signs. Within a minute, I was lost. We ended up circling back to the airport and stopping at the side of the road there to reset before going out and trying again. This time, we used the phone for directions instead of the handwritten instructions, and it went much better. After a few twists and turns, we rolled up to the toll plaza of the Autostrada, and here I made a rookie mistake and got in the wrong lane and was unable to pick up a ticket. After a few miles, I got off at the proper exit and went to the toll booth on the far right. I tried the help button to no avail. Luckily, there was no one behind me. I looked ahead and saw 2 poles. One was directly in front, the other was about 10 feet further on. I decided there was only one thing to do. There was just enough space for me to steer the car around the 2 poles. I then stopped at the building just beyond the toll plaza. I figured maybe I could go in there and pay, but the door was locked and there were no lights on in the building. So I got back in the car and left. I figured I'd be looking at a fairly stiff fine. It's usually equivalent to whatever the most expensive toll is on the route. After that drama, the rest of the drive was pretty easy. The highway to Siena is 2 lanes in both directions. The first 10 or 15 miles, the inside lane was closed off periodically due to construction. If you're driving in the inside lane, you have to pay attention so that you see those lane closures and move over in a timely manner. I basically stayed in the inside lane and kept the car at or under the speed limit. Pretty much everyone was blowing past me. From my observations, the average driver was going at least 10 kilometers per hour over the speed limit, which is similar to what it is in the United States. The difference was that Italian drivers pass really close on your left and then swoop back in front of you without signaling. In fact, signaling a lane change did not seem very popular, at least on this route. The lanes are more narrow than those of U.S. interstates, and there's not always a breakdown lane available. The scenery on the road was pleasant with lots of greenery and hills. Traffic was moderate. We reached Siena in an hour or so without any problems. I had planned to stop in Siena for dinner, but we ended up staying on the road to the resort. A wise decision in hindsight because Siena is difficult in its own way, and you should do a little bit of prep before you drive into the city. After about 30 minutes of driving along narrow, winding roads, over hills and through the occasional village, we reached our destination. Borgo San Felice had just opened for the season, and we were among the first guests to arrive. It's a beautiful place, really spectacular, and it's set up so you never have to leave. There are restaurants, a spa, wine tours, e-bike rentals, etc. That and the unanticipated difficulty of driving in these rural areas discouraged me from taking all the day trips that I had planned. In the end, we only used the car 2 out of the 4 days we were in Tuscany. Once to go to Siena, tour the city and do laundry, and the other to visit a nearby village and have dinner at an acclaimed Michelin-starred restaurant. Ultimately, the main purpose of having the car was to get to and from the resort. When Sunday rolled around, I mapped the return trip on my iPad and was surprised to discover that there was a route that avoided the Autostrada toll road entirely and only took a few more minutes, so I decided to try it. We took the same highway back up toward Florence, but this time we exited before the Autostrada and then followed a fairly Byzantine route to the rental car center. A lot of turns, traffic lights, roundabouts, and then there's a stretch on an elevated highway for a couple of miles before the airport exit. We got in there in one piece, but without the phone directions it would have been very difficult. If you're using a phone like we did, make sure you have the correct rental car office listed. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2, and you don't want to wind up at the city center location. The rental car return was pretty easy. We entered the lot on the west side, and an attendant waved us over to a parking spot nearby. He checked the car, and then we waited by the taxi stand for a ride to our hotel in the city. We toured Florence a bit and stayed overnight before taking the train back the next day. In the end, despite my mishaps, I think this option of taking the train from Venice to Florence and then renting a car to drive into the countryside is a good one. Whether you rent from the Florence airport or the city center, the important thing is to do some preparation first. Go through the initial part of your journey with Google Street Views to familiarize yourself with the trip. Plan on using your phone for directions whenever possible. And finally, check out the Mom in Italy website page on paying tolls in Italy. It has a lot of pictures and useful information so that you won't drive through the toll plaza without picking up a ticket like I did. It also has information on paying the toll when you exit. A couple of quick postscripts on the trip. The final bill came to $526, or almost $200 more than the original estimate from Expedia. About $160 of that was from the value-added tax and the location surcharge. So in the end, it cost a little more than $100 a day. Surprisingly, despite my blatant toll evasion, I never got an extra bill from Budget Rent-A-Car. Pretty shocked about that, but I'm not complaining. I think ultimately this is a very doable trip, so long as you prepare for it. Hope this helps. Thanks for watching.